My name is Allie Thomas-Fannin. I am a psychiatrist. I also specialize in addiction medicine. Well, I'm an addiction medicine specialist. I am originally from Kentucky, so don't hold it against me. My family is originally from Kentucky and North Carolina and kind of Tennessee area. My husband's from Tennessee. I'm married, been married for about 15 years. We have 3 kids, 3's enough. 2 girls and a boy. They're in elementary and toddler ages. I went to med school at UofL. I went to my undergrad in Philadelphia, actually in Haverford College outside of Philadelphia. And I did my residency at Duke University. I became a physician mostly because of my mother's experience with the healthcare system. My mother was a physician, but she developed a series of autoimmune diseases when I was younger and wasn't able to practice after a little while. And so it was kind of a mystery trying to figure out what was going on with her. And I became interested in psychiatry in medical school as I went through kind of the non-psychiatric fields, interacting with psychiatric patients who just weren't able to get what they needed because of their psychiatric disorders. That got in the way of them interacting well with healthcare teams, with them getting to follow-up appointments, and with them being able to understand what kinds of treatments they were needing or getting, and then learning through my training more about the impacts of childhood trauma on adult pathologies, regardless of any kind of lifestyle or environmental factors, so cardiovascular disease, cancer, and other things that childhood trauma impacts in adulthood, including increasing incidence of depression as an adult, made me much more interested in the field. And the brain is kind of the final frontier of medicine, in my opinion. The brain and the immune system and how they interact is really fascinating to me. And I work in addictions, which is often a result of a very complex interaction with the environment and your underlying genetics and the environment you were raised in. And so a lot of things kind of go into making people who they are and their outcomes in their health. So I really feel like I'm in a unique position as a psychiatrist to work with folks on the true problem, which is scary for some, but I tend to be kind of a down-to-earth, realistic type person. So generally fairly approachable. I like humor, so I curse a lot. So my patients all kind of know that, and some of them really appreciate it because they're used to people kind of looking down on them for doing things. And I'm like, all right, what are we doing? You know? But I also trained at a VA with angry people who curse, and so they tend to appreciate somebody who's a bit more real with them, and people who curse are supposedly more honest. So generally with a psychiatrist, it's more about talking. So and I'll review records and possibly get some lab work, but it just depends on what's going on. Generally, I'll see somebody after they've seen usually a therapist who's kind of taken a lot of history and kind of gone through what's been going on with you recently, something that we call the biopsychosocial history, and like where'd you grow up, things like that. And then I really kind of go through different parts of symptoms, but I really want to hear in your words what's going on. And my interview style tends to be fairly what most people call naturalistic. So things tend to flow. So if it feels like a conversation, that's why. Like, that's what it is. It's less like an interview and more like a conversation, because we can pick up a lot more if you're able to tell me in your own words what's going on, rather than me peppering you with a bunch of questions. And that feels more like an interrogation, and that's not very helpful. I like more rural areas. I like not being in big crowds. I like the woods, and I like nature, even though I'm allergic to some of it and it tries to kill me sometimes. But I kind of like space, and I liked the kind of environment for my family, because they like the outdoors and the woods and creeks and fishing, and my husband likes doing workshop things, and he has his own little shop, so he can kind of do stuff with. I liked the environment at Good Sam, and I liked that most of the docs here really seemed to like it here and stayed, and I didn't want to have to pick up and move in a few years. And I liked the opportunity to participate in residency training, because that's one of the other things that I really enjoy was teaching. I would have become a teacher if I hadn't gone to medical school. So I did a residency teachers concentration at Duke, and so teaching and doing medical student work and working with residents has always been something that I've enjoyed. And when I did my residency training, I was the education chief at the VA, so I was in charge of making sure all the interns knew what they were doing and making sure all the students were where they needed to be, and teaching interviewing skills. And so teaching has always been a big part of who I am as a person and as a doctor. So my mom always said the best doctors were teachers too. So I do explain a lot to my patients, and they generally appreciate that. If you don't, just tell me and I'll shut up. I tend to over-explain because I usually have students with me, and my students are generally there to learn. And most of my patients have gotten used to my students around, and some of them will show them neat things, like a tremor or tell them their story. And my students always appreciate, and I find that students always learn best from people in their own words. And it really takes away a lot of the stigma from folks who are going to be orthopedic surgeons or folks who are going to be internal medicine specialists. If I can put more of a human face on psychiatric illness and psychiatric patients, because they're people just like everybody else, and they're in your family, and they're in your lives, and they're in our community, and they're not really that different from everybody else. So, yeah. I have a lot of them actually, because I don't know how I have time for a job. One of my hobbies is teaching, so that's what I enjoy that. But I enjoy reading. I have always been kind of a big reader. I'll read in short spurts. I like playing cards. I like nerdy card games, things like that. I'll play like Magic the Gathering, and my kids have gotten into Pokemon cards, so I'm trying to figure out how that works. It's a whole different system of card game. But they're more into collecting them right now, and so I'm trying to figure out how the game works, and they're like, but we collect the cards. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a game too. I'm trying to figure out how the game works. And they're like, I didn't know it was a game. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how the game works. I like computers, and I like, fantasy stuff, fantasy movies, and me and my husband share that as an interest in science fiction. I enjoy, I'm a people person, so I tend to be an extrovert, so I enjoy hanging out with friends and family. I enjoy crafting, so not great at it, but I like making stuff, resin, painting, beading, I make jewelry with my kids, or I'll do a little experiment box thing that we get together, and so they really like that. But I like making stuff, so it's always been fun for me. My favorite health tip is to get enough sleep. People really underestimate how much sleep plays into how much energy you have during the day. If it's a common complaint among patients, well, I don't have enough energy. All right, if you're only sleeping 4 hours a night, you're not gonna have enough energy. That's just how that works, because your body needs to sleep, and most people need about 7 hours. So my favorite health tip is to try and get more sleep. And there's a lot of mechanisms in our brain to keep us awake. There's not as many to put us to sleep. So it's a common problem with folks who come to see me. And so if you're having trouble sleeping, that's something that definitely should be addressed and looked at. And drink less caffeine in the afternoon. I love coffee. It's my favorite thing. It might be a separate hobby of mine, but I try to cut it off by 2 o'clock. So that's my favorite health tip, is to limit caffeine in the afternoon and get enough sleep.